Let's jump right into I have PTSD. Now what? In my last video, which I did last week, I talked about how to tell if you have PTSD from the trauma that you experienced from the emotional and psychological abuse that you've been through. And during that video, I talked briefly about how because of ongoing abuse, our God-given threat survival system gets stuck on high, the system that was created for just a one-time, like almost getting hit by a car. But when it gets stuck on high because we're under threat all the time, this causes really severe dysregulation in our body and in our brain, and that's what causes PTSD. So it's not your fault that you have PTSD. It's not a sin that you have PTSD. It's not a sin causing your PTSD. It's not weakness on your part that's causing PTSD. It's not because you don't have enough faith that you have PTSD. It's actually a totally predictable response to trauma, ongoing trauma, which is why 88% of marital abuse survivors end up with PTSD. And because trauma has these long-lasting effects on how your body and brain respond to life, it's really important to understand how this is affecting your thoughts, your feelings, your healing, and those responses to life that you feel like you can't control. So, really, we kind of have a broken brain, yet we're being blamed for our reactions and our struggles by our abuser, by the church, by friends, even by family members, and sometimes we even end up blaming ourselves. So I just want you to know you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not unstable. Whatever you've been told by other people, those are not true. What I know is that you're strong and you're brave and you're actually very resilient, no matter how you feel right now or no matter what you think about yourself. So, what do we do about PTSD? Well, trauma research has shown that talk therapy is actually not enough to heal PTSD because the dysregulation is in our bodies and our brains. So we need the right healing modality for PTSD. In fact, there are a lot of us, me included, that talk therapy really didn't help nearly as much as we were hoping. And the effect of the trauma on us is why it doesn't help. Most of us grew up being told that, just talking about your distressing feelings can resolve them. But neuroscientific research is showing us that the experience of trauma itself gets in the way of that. And Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and he's one of the leading trauma researchers in the world, here's a quote from his book. Trauma changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. So now that we know that the neuroscience research is showing us that our brain has been changed by trauma, we can understand why talk therapy isn't going to help us in the way that we want. Because see, when those alarm bells are signaling all the time that you're in danger, even if you're out of the abuse, those alarm bells are still sending those signals to your brain because of the dysregulation in your body and brain. So when that's going on, no matter how much insight and understanding you have, the rational brain is basically unable to talk the overreactive brain and the overreactive nervous system out of the trauma responses like hypervigilance. That's why it's so hard to talk yourself out of feeling worthless or insecure or overwhelmed or brain foggy or unmotivated or empty inside or just anxiety, like about making a decision, anxiety about parenting, being afraid of being alone, not trusting yourself, all that kind of stuff, not feeling at peace with God and with yourself, all these things you can't talk yourself out of. Like, as you probably well know, you can't talk yourself out of being triggered because that rational brain has gone offline and our capacity to think has changed. And you can stand in the mirror and give yourself affirmations all you want. And let me tell you, I used to do that. Oh boy, did I ever do that. Not necessarily in front of a mirror, but all day long, I'd just be like giving myself affirmations. And it wasn't healing the trauma. It was helping me get through the day somewhat. So now I'm not saying that understanding and insight is not important or helpful, because it is, especially when we're trying to understand the abusive situation that we're in and, making hard decisions. I know it's very, very important, and that's why I have a website with over 40 articles to give clarity. But, oh, and also, we do have very real feelings that are not actually part of PTSD, like our grief and the betrayal and the anger. These are all very real, legitimate feelings for what we've been through. And we have a lot of brainwashing and lies we have to sort out as well. But what do we actually need to heal from the trauma and the PTSD? We need to understand how the trauma has affected us, both our body and our brain, our nervous system, as well as how it's affecting our thoughts and emotions. And we need very specific tools for calming those trauma reactions and triggers that's coming from our overreactive brain and body. These reactions that leave us stuck in the symptoms and the reactions and the painful feelings, these very symptoms that make it hard for us to change our thoughts. And these tools, these very specific tools, can help regulate our emotions and stabilize our whole inner world. So it's very important for dealing with trauma that you understand that it's not just, prayer or thinking positively or renewing your mind. You need much more than that. There are a lot of other things we also need to heal from the trauma. We really need to reconnect with ourselves and create emotional safety with ourselves in our own relationship with ourselves. And we also need to learn to become our own hero by connecting with our inner strength, with our courage, with the things that are right with us, and by learning that we can rely on ourselves again. And we need to be building on those strengths. These are the very things that the abuser exploited, like strengths like commitment and loyalty and trust and tenderheartedness and dependability and compassion. We need to take these strengths and turn them toward ourselves in our healing. We also need to redevelop those inner resources that we think we've lost, because when we are trying to save a marriage for years or decades, and there's no way to save it because our husband is not going to change, we end up thinking that there's something wrong with us, that we've lost our own ability. So we need to refine those abilities that we think we've lost that are actually not gone. They are still there. And we also need very specific self-care for trauma. And that's a lot more than bubble baths. And we need to learn how to create a quiet, gentle life while we're healing. In my Arise healing community, I call it building a hammocky life, where we're really supporting ourselves. We also need to we need to discover how to have compassion on ourselves and use tools to release ourself from blame and guilt and shame and all that garbage that we're carrying around, and build up our sense of self-worth and undo lies that we've believed about ourselves. And there are tools that can help us undo those lies so much more quickly than just through, positive thinking. We also need to learn how to set boundaries from self-worth rather than from fear and protection. And we need to learn how to change our mindset from powerlessness to feeling empowered and feeling like that self-leader that we can be. And then we need to learn tools to process these really horrible feelings like grief. Oh, the horrible, horrible grief, the betrayal, the anger, the devastation. And of course, we need to heal spiritual abuse that we've been through and heal our connection to the real Jesus, not the one that the church is telling us doesn't want us to get divorced and all those lies, but the real Jesus, the one who loves the oppressed and the wounded and the brokenhearted. And then we want to find, again, purpose and meaning for our life. And lastly, we need a community where we feel understood, where we feel heard and seen, where we are treated with a compassion and understanding in our struggles while we're healing trauma, never being shamed or judged for struggling. And these are all the things that we do in the Arise Healing community. And in Arise, there's a roadmap for healing. So Arise has a combination of 8 different teaching modules that gives you the roadmap for healing all these things that I've talked about. You know, your mind and your emotions and your overactive body and your spirit. And the roadmap also gives you tools that will help calm your body down and um, help you manage triggers and eventually heal the trauma. So Arise is a journey of growth and transformation. You get to go from being a struggling survivor, and as you go through the journey, then you become like a reconnecting with yourself survivor, and then a stabilizing survivor as you learn how to stabilize your inner world. Then you become an empowered survivor and a healing survivor and an arising survivor. Because, see, we are a whole being, body, mind, emotions, and spirit. And we need healing for all these parts of ourselves. And God created all these parts of us to work in harmony. And when we've discovered how to restore the proper balance between these parts of ourselves, our system calms down. We feel in charge of our decision making. We feel in charge of our feelings again. We feel in charge of how we are responding to life and how we want to live our life. And that brings us peace. So one of the Arise sisters wanted you to know something, so I'm going to read to you what she said. Before I joined Arise, my eyes had been open to the abuse. I had taken the step of separation and I had been pursuing my healing through a number of avenues, but I was still struggling quite a bit with my emotions. Through Arise, I've learned so many tools to help me process my emotions. The tools have helped me immensely in my day-to-day life as I process past hurts and face anxiety about the future. I've been learning how to reconnect to myself and love myself. Arise is such a unique combination of support, community, and teachings about abuse and trauma and healing that you gain so much more than head knowledge. That's so true. Helena guides you into a journey of healing for all of you. I have gained so much more from Arise than I even hoped to when I joined. So Arise is a place for women who are married, separated, or divorced, who are really wanting to heal from all this horrible damage that the abuse has done. I know you can become an arising healing survivor. I know you can because I've become one, and I went through so much horrific child abuse, and then, was with my abusive husband for 26 years. But this is what I do know. It takes being really intentional about your healing. It takes being committed to it. And it takes finding the right healing path that actually is going to address the problem that you're dealing with. So if you're in talk therapy, it's not going to help the PTSD in the way you want. That's why we need to have the right healing modality for what our problem is. And that's why Arise is a trauma-informed program. I've been trained by Bessel van der Kolk and many of the world-leading trauma therapists. And that's what I really wanted to offer for Christian women, because we're not getting that from the church. I mean, they don't even understand abuse. It's not like they're going to be able to help us heal. So I created a very unique program. It's the only one out there for Christian women that's trauma informed at the level that mine is. So anyway, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you soon.